be much more productive to look at the question of heritage in terms of what I call provenance. When in scope we say separating the signal from the noise, I think that is something that we want to bring to the discussion of heritage. Each time a work, an idea, a practice, an object, each time we talk about it, let us try and think about the repertoire of signals or signs that it sets off because of the context in which it is located. That does not mean that the work, the object, the practice, and we don't have to think about heritage only as objects, performances, practices, urban environments, the circulation of peoples through spaces. All this belongs to what I'm calling provenance, or the itinerary of a work. Therefore, for me, the notion of heritage is the notion of transformation, transition, and movement in our world today, and it relates to culture not only as objects, but as performance, whether that be theatre, music, dance, the citizen. It is very important to see cultural heritage as an act of global citizenship, a way of saying we take responsibility not only for who we are and what we do, we also take responsibility for how we react, how we relate to you who are within our societies, just as we have been in your societies, either as travelers, as commercial businessmen, colonizers, to understand the mutuality of belonging in a global world, the mutual relational form of belonging. I think it is very important to open the question of heritage to the notion of cultural citizenship. It is important for the future of the world to understand how we think of heritage in the societies of migration, how we make the link between the histories, the arts, the cultures, the sciences of those who have migrated into this society with the narrative we have within societies that are so-called host societies, and how they must rethink their own historical narrative, their own notions of history and heritage. I think this is very important. We should see migration not as a problem brought to us by people who came from elsewhere, but we should see migration principally as an opportunity, a creative opportunity to produce a notion of culture which is transformative and which looks towards the future of the world. In migrant societies, the question of heritage is a creative opportunity. Now you might want to say that the domination of one culture over another is indeed a warlike condition, even if there is no actual war going on. It's a warlike condition because if one culture or one cultural product is so dominant economically and politically, it goes in and blasts out what is happening in other countries on the ground. It destroys artistic communities. It destroys cultural institutions just because that is so dominant. I think that is a very real question and a very real issue. In whose interest is it that MTV, for instance, should have such a dominant place in world culture, and they try to make their product out of local materials, but they still define generally what MTV, what the look of MTV is. So it seems to me that, again, I would suggest to you that there is no one place from which you can push the giant. I think you have to be able to act at different levels, take even smaller details of this situation, and insert yourself as creative agents as and where you can, and not feel that if you cannot throw the giant out of the house, there is nothing else to do. You have to keep working on cultural issues with the mission of cultural transformation, even at points at which you feel that your opponent is so powerful that you cannot move. I am saying that the truth exists in not always being focused simply on that which you think is oppressive or is dominant, because that reduces your creative potential to see where you can make your intervention in a way that is both hopeful and helpful. And I think it is a time not for utopianism, but for what I call aspiration. That is the possibility of narrative, of narrating, of saying, of representing what you feel should happen, being aware of the fact that your feet are on this shifting ground of a transitional or incubational time. We may fail with one objective, we may fail to transform something, but failure is not simply calculated at the point at which whether you succeeded in the end. What about what happened on the means? You made new groups, you generated new ideas, you thought about new possibilities. So we should not have simply an ends-oriented idea of cultural or political transformation. We should also have a means-oriented. On our way to our moment of failure or success, what did we manage to change? How did we manage to change our notion of solidarity or affiliation or culture or heritage? I think that's something that we want to do in this conference, and correct me if I'm wrong, by changing the end argument of heritage, which is, should this be preserved or should this not be preserved? You know, should this be somehow framed as heritage? By questioning the various means by which we understand what is heritage. And I've given you one example, which is the notion of provenance as a way of thinking about the changing value of cultural practices, objects or sites. By rethinking issues like that, I think we learn how to aspire, even if we do not always succeed. Austria could be a bridge in this discussion.